Hi, friends. Welcome to this office hour. We are talking about while loops and we're going to talk about for loops. These are going to be things that you will use all the time. There's a couple different iterations that we're going to talk about. A couple different things. I sent an email today. I asked ChatGPT, I said, hey, what is the difference between a while loop and a for loop? Why would we use one or the other? And let me actually log in and I can show you exactly what it said. Sorry, I have to do this. Login. There we go. So just from a basic perspective, I asked it, what is the difference between a while loop and a for loop? And they are both at the heart of it. A while loop and a for loop are used for if you want to repeat code a couple times, if you want to do the same thing over and over and over and over again, we're going to use something like a while loop or a for loop. And there's different, again, there's different iterations, different little tools that we can do, different little pieces built into it. But if we are wanting to repeat and do something over and over, iterating through is a very common thing. If you've got data that you've got to iterate through, or you want to search and you have to keep searching because you have multiple conditions or multiple pieces of data you've got to pull, you might use a for loop or a while loop. You might also do a while loop if you've just got some piece of information that you want it to react. And if you are, getting some information, let's say from the stock market, and you say, okay, while the stock is at a certain price, I just want you to keep it, right? You can think about Robinhood as an app on your phone. Some people hate it, some people love it. And what you can do on it is you can actually set a sort of a sell price, basically saying, as long as it's above this price, while it's still above $50, let's keep it. If it gets to a point where it's at $40, then I want you to go ahead and sell it. Or if it gets below, or you could do the other way. If it gets below $40, I want you to buy another stock or put another $100 in, something like that, right? You can set these conditions. A for loop is something that we can just do over and over and over and over again, similar to a while loop. But with a for loop, we actually know when it's going to end, right? We know we have some condition that the loop, when it starts, it knows I'm going to end when blank happens. The while loop, similar to our stock market sort of explanation, is we don't know. We don't know if the stock is ever going to get below $40. We don't know if it's ever going to, get above X whatever. So we're just saying, well, while it's above $40, keep it, hold it, don't do anything. So that's the main condition, or the main difference between a while loop and a for loop. A while loop is when we are repeating or doing tasks over and over, and we don't know the end result or when the end result is going to happen, if the stock is ever going to hit below 40. A for loop is we know when something's going to happen. We know when we're iterating through an entire list, we say, okay, well, when we're done iterating through that list, let's be done. That's it. And we'll see sort of more of that in a bit. But that's really the biggest issue, the biggest change between those two. Now, when we're setting up a while loop, there's a few things we have to do because they are very, very, very different. And you can, in a while loop, sort of get yourself in some trouble. So here at the top, I've got a while loop. And there's a few things we have to do. First off, because again, we don't know really when something's going to, or if it's going to hit, we have to have some sort of index. We have to have some sort of number. So let's think about this. Just take the stock, our stock price right now, right? That's what this var B is. This is our stock price. Let's say it's $10. What we can say is, while B is greater than $10 or greater than 0, because we'll say 1. So that way we at least salvage $1. I'm going to say console.log B plus B dollars of the share. I'm just going to put that. It doesn't really make sense, but basically we're just saying that's how many dollars the share costs. I'm just going to put per share. That makes way more sense. Okay. So we're saying, okay, our stock is at $10, and we're saying as long as it is above this, let's go ahead and console.log this. Now we can decrement, and this is a big thing, is we don't know when this is going to happen. and maybe we have, or sorry, this is our condition right here. We don't know if it's gonna hit if the market goes up. Let's say market goes up, and maybe I have some sort of function that says, B++, which means that let's add to this, the stock price got higher, and then I could say market goes down, then we say B minus minus. Let's pretend that we had some function here that made this either go up or down, right? Now, what that will allow is, okay, well, let's say the market goes up. Let's just hope, because the market's not been great lately. Say the market goes up, right? Okay, cool. It's above this one. That's awesome. Let's just console log this. That's good to go. And what this will do is this will iterate through over and over and over again until the condition is met. Now, what we can do is, let's say the market's been bad, as it has been. If this happens and I run this, then what will happen is it'll say, wow, B is greater than 1. It's going to console.log. Cool. Then the next day the market goes down. B minus minus, B now becomes 10. And so then, or 9, sorry, 10 minus 1. That's what the minus minus is. That's the same thing as saying B minus 1. Now is 9 still greater than 1? Yeah, it's still true, right? This condition is still true. 9 is greater than 1. So then let's go ahead and console.log, $9 per share. Then the next day the market goes down again, B minus minus. Now B is 8 greater than 1. And you'll see that while the while loop continues to do this, let's say we had a fluctuation and it just kept going, and every single day it just console logged, this is how much per share, right? We don't know if it's ever going to get to this point, but let's say that it does. Right now, B is 2. This happens, right? Console logs $2 per share. And then another day with the market down, and now B is minus minus, which now B equals 1. Well, what's going to happen is it's going to get here and say, is B, which is now 1, greater than 1? That condition is going to be false, right? 1 is not greater than 1. It is equal to 1, but it is not greater. The minute a while loop gets a false condition right here, it exits the loop in totality. So the minute this is false, now it exits the while loop and it goes and it does something else. Now here's where you can get in trouble. Let's say I forgot just even this, and I went to run this right now. Well, B is 10. And it's going to say, wow, B, and this is even giving me an error, right? Trying to say you're going to mess up your code. While B is greater than 1. Well, that is true, right? 10 is greater than 1. It always has been and always will be. Well, in my loop, all I'm doing is console logging and saying, okay, $10 per share, but I'm not changing the value of B at all. So then once it gets to the end of my loop, it's going to come and say, is 10 greater than 1? Well, yes, it is. So it's going to console log this. And it's going to do that forever. Your computer, if you were to run this, your computer will lock down because it's constantly running because the condition's never changing, right? B never has a chance for this condition to be false because 10, it's going to stay 10. And because it's going to stay 10, 10's always greater than 1. So it's just going to be stuck in what we call an infinite loop, meaning that your computer will break, your system will break. If you have an application, it's just going to sit here. And it will console log until it gets a Stack Overflow, and it kind of, and then it goes down. So anytime you're dealing with a while loop, the sort of 3 things that you have to make sure: you are setting up your index, right? You have some sort of value. You've got a condition. Here, your condition is B is greater than 1, but it could be anything you want it to be. And the last thing is you have to increment or decrement the index. You have to make it go up or down. The same thing, let's say if we wanted to increment up and we want to say is, less than 100, then I want to buy a share every time. Cool, I can do that as long as B is increasing, because eventually it will get to a point where you can, eventually get to a point where it gets to this, it is no longer less than 100, and then it exits the while loop. Now there's some other nuance. This is a very basic explanation. And you might ask, well, if we don't know when the condition is going to happen, won't we obviously be stuck in a while loop? There's things that we can do to prevent that. But this is the basics of a while loop. Are there any questions? Any questions on the while loop? You just put a 1 in the chat if this makes sense. Obviously put a 0 if it does not. Cool. Great. Now, next we've got our for loop. And can anybody explain the for loop? What's exactly happening here? The pieces of the for loop. Anybody want to take a shot at explaining it?
Oh, I'll explain it.
Okay, yeah, hit us.
So when you write for, you're indicating that you're going to start the for loop.
Yep.
The first variable before this, the first semicolon is saying, okay, variable I equals 10. That's the index where you want to start at.
Mhm.
The one that goes after is the condition. You say, as long as that variable is less than or greater than, in this case, it would be greater than 0. And the last section, the I minus minus, is how much you're going to decrement or add.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
then in the body is what you want to happen each time.
Perfect. Great job, Alex. Can you walk me through, or can somebody else walk me through, how does the computer think? What is the process? Let's say it's our first one, right? Our computer just sees line 17 for the first time. What is it doing?
Okay, I think the first one, if they see 10, and then they go loop one more time and then go to down increment, I mean down one is 9 until like we get to greater than 0.
Yeah, exactly. So great job. Thank you so much. So exactly what happens is it sees this for loop, just like Alex said, and it says, okay, I'm going to start this for loop. I know that I'm going to do this repetitive code. Then it starts at 10. And so what we're doing is we're creating this variable of I that only lives within this for loop, right? And I can be anything. You'll see I as that's the common way that you're going to do that, or the common, like what you'll typically see I or J. If you have like a nested for loop, you'll see J, and we'll see what a nested for loop looks like here in a bit. But we're basically creating this variable I that lives within this loop that sets our index, like Alex said, and that's going to be 10. Then what the computer does is it says, okay, I've done this part. Cool. Is this, and it checks this guy and it says, is I greater than 0? Which it is, right? 10 is greater than 0. That is true. So then it enters into this code block and it does whatever it says. So it's going to console.log, 9 kegs on the wall. Then once it's done doing whatever's in the code block, it comes up once it gets to this edge piece, or the end sort of bracket, comes up, and then it hits this guy right here. This is our increment or decrement version. And we can do multiple things with it. You don't just have to do -1. You could do evens. You could do by 2, or you could do by 5. If you want to decrement by 5, you could do all that as well. But then we're saying, okay, I minus minus. So now I is no longer 9 or 10, but now it's 9. So then it goes and it checks, is this condition still true? Well, 9 is greater than 0. Great. That is true. We get another check mark. We come down here and we do whatever is within our code block. Then once that's done, it goes up to here, decrements again. Now I becomes 8. And it does that, and it checks, is 8 greater than 0, checks our condition. That is true, enters into my code block, does whatever my code block says, goes up to my decrement. Now I is 7, and it keeps doing that over and over and over until eventually I becomes 1, right? It keeps decrementing because I is 2, 2 is greater than 0, I is 1, 1 is greater than 0. Then once I is 1, let's say that I did this. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. I just wanted to console log I. What's going to happen is this would console log 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right? Then what would happen is it's going to go 1. It's going to come up here. I is going to be minus minus. So I is now 0. Then it's going to check, is 0 greater than 0? It is not. So then it exits my for loop. So once that condition is no longer true, it exits my for loop. Any questions on for loops? Any thoughts? Does that make sense? Cool, lots of ones. That's good. Now, these are the basics, and this is really like if we use anything, we'll just use a basic for loop. What we can do is, let's try to think. I'll show you guys here in a bit, the other stuff. But then there's variations of what we can do. There's built-in functionality that oftentimes is faster. Now, when you guys are getting ready for coding interviews and you guys are going through and prepping to go do sort of some algorithms before you know, or while you guys are interviewing and you do some algorithms, a for loop is a really easy way to iterate through things, but it can be sort of timely. What I mean by that is, if you don't know about this, that is very okay. But there's this thing in this idea behind coding is called time and space complexity. How fast is your algorithm? And how much space does your algorithm take up? How fast is your algorithm? And how much space does your algorithm take up? And so one thing with a for loop that is awesome is, yes, it is great to iterate through something. But if we have multiple things we have to iterate through, then we have something called a nested for loop, and that can get really slow. Let's say we had 1 million lines of code. And that I wanted to iterate through each one to check individually for just one thing. And that can be pretty slow, right? Because what if that one thing I'm trying to find is the last thing that I check? That can be pretty slow. And especially what if in that I have 1 million users I have to iterate through. And within my user profile, there's a list of favorite foods. So let's say I wanted to find the user named Will, who had a top 3 list of foods. And I wanted the user Will, that's favorite foods were sushi and pizza and donuts. Those are not my favorite foods, but let's just say. Well, what I'd have to do is I would first have to check, I would have to for loop through the first person, right? I'd get the first person. And then I'd have to for loop through all of their favorite foods in order to make sure, does this match? And let's say the first person's name is Will, but it's they have sushi and pizza, but their third thing is sandwiches. Well, okay, then I've got to start over and I have to go to the next person. That's what we call a nested for loop. And that can take a lot of time. So what developers who create these languages do is they create clever tools and clever ways to sort of do easier, built-in, faster searches instead of just having to, it's called brute forcing it, meaning it's going to work. It's just going to take a long time, right? It's sort of the basic version 1 of your algorithm. It's called like a brute forcing algorithm. And so there's other tools and tips and tricks, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit right now. So for our while loop, there's this thing called a do while loop, where it still operates the same, where we've got, where I've got this index that I'm going to create, and I'm going to have, I have this variable called C that sets my index. But instead of having it in my while loop here, you're actually utilizing this built-in functionality called do and setting your condition here. And it's broken down. And though it's broken down and it looks, okay, why is that not the same? It does actually add, in a speed perspective, because of the way that the do functionality works. It adds to the speed of your while loop, because you're now utilizing these built-in functions. So what you're saying is, okay, here's my condition. And while that is happening, this is what I want you to do. Here's how it sets up my index. That's just an example of a while loop. Now here's where a lot of the for loop functionality comes in that is very, very popular and very, very good to know. Here I've got a object called keg. That's got, it is just an object, right? So it's got a key of size, of color, and a quantity. Now, one thing to do is dictionaries are objects. Their dictionary is what they call it in Python. Object is what they call it in JavaScript. Very, 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 very popular data type, right? Composite type, if you will, because you can have multiple. Here we have a number and we've got a string. Well, what I can do if I want to iterate through this object is I can say for var. So again, I'm setting my index of key. This key could be anything I want it. It could be unicorn if I wanted. It doesn't matter. This is just some variable name. It could be I, it could be J, it could be cupcake, whatever. In keg. Now what that will do is that will iterate through all of the keys in my object. So if I were to run this, we would get size, half, color. I don't want to run the second one yet. I guess we can talk about it. Now, because this key represents my, this key variable, I'm going to call this unicorn just so you know. Unicorn represents our keys in our object. So what I can say is, cool, I want you to just go ahead and console log the key, but then I can also, we know that we can go into an object and give it the key. And if we give it the key of that object, it will return the value. So here I can just say keg of unicorn, and I'm passing in the key. And then it's going to give me the value at that specific key. So at the very beginning, what's happening is unicorn is set to the first. It always starts at the beginning. So unicorn is size, this first one, right? So when we go in, we're going to console log size, because that's our key. Then we go in and say, okay, what's the value there? In this case is half. Then it goes to the top again and it says, all right, what's the next key? Well, it's color. So here we get color. We go in, get its value of brown. It does that because this is the built-in functionality of the for in loop. We know that it will do that until the end of this object. So it'll go through all of my keys. And then once that is done, that is its condition to break, to no longer do anything. Any questions on that one? It's a pretty sweet one to know. I'm going to skip this one because we're going to talk about like maps and filters and stuff tomorrow. So I'm going to skip this one. But any questions on this for in loop? Cool. Now there's other times where you want your for loops to run and basically say, okay, if you get to this point, I want you to exit, right? If I find the user whose name is Will and has these favorite foods, I don't need you to do anything. I just need you to exit, right? What that means is I can use this keyword called break. That means I want you to be done. So here we say, once it gets to 5, so if I run this, we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, if we're breaking this down and what this is doing, again, we start at 0. That's our index. We set up our index. We're saying if I is greater or less than 10, sorry, that's our condition. And then we're increasing. We're incrementing up I++. Then we are console logging I. So I is 0. We console log it. Great. Then we have this random condition that's saying, okay, but if I equals 5, then let's go ahead and be done. I want you to exit my for loop. Don't finish it. Do not wait until this condition is true. Just be done. And so what happens is we go to 1 is not 5. Great. So it keeps going. 2 is not 5, 3, 4. It gets to 5. We enter into this if statement. We say, is I equal 5? It is, that is true. Okay, break. Break is the key word to exit a for loop. So you can see that we exit once we get to 5. It doesn't go all the way to 10 or to 9. Right? You would think that it would go 0 to 9. It doesn't. It just goes to 5 because it breaks. Any questions? Does this make sense? The break?
If console log I was after the if statement on
Mhm.
line 57 instead, it would only go up to 4, correct?
Yes. Let's see. So right here.
Outside the if statement. Yeah, there.
Yeah. Yes, because it'll only go to 4 because it'll already break. So let's see. Should. Yes. Because we're saying, all right, has this condition been met? If it hasn't, because remember, it's going to go straight into here. If it is 5, it'll break before. Okay, this condition hasn't been met. Let's go here. So yeah, Alan, it goes straight. It goes to 4 because it'll already break if it gets to 5. Which is sort of like this one. So same similar concept. But this one is, let's say I didn't want it to exit my for loop. What I did is actually just wanted to skip it. Like I just want you to continue. So let's say, for example, I'm just making this up on the spot. So if there's flaws, please don't judge me. Let's say that I am trying to get Taylor Swift tickets. I don't know if any of you battled that journey, but my wife did. And let's say that I had some algorithm and I wanted to see, I was giving out, I had all these people sign up on, and I'm Ticketmaster. And I have this entire list and somehow I ranked them. And I wanted to check and see, have they already got tickets? And if not, like I have these, 500 tickets reserved. I'm gonna give it to 250 people, right? Each person gets 2 tickets. Well, what if I wanted to check and say, if they've already got tickets, well, I don't want to give them exclusive access, right? I want to skip them and then go to the next person. This would be a great example of how to do a continue. Now, we'll walk through this and then I'll kind of explain my example. But here's the same thing, but we're saying if I equals 5, then go ahead and continue. Meaning skip over the rest of this and just go to the next piece. So if I were to run this, you see I get 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, nothing for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So you can think about it from a real world perspective of I have this list of people and I'm iterating through and I'm saying, do they already have tickets? Maybe I have some, if I do some sort of check and I'm Ticketmaster and I can say, if they already have tickets, go ahead and continue, meaning don't give them exclusive access, right? Skip to the next person. But if they don't have tickets, right, then go ahead and maybe this is some function to send them an email that says, hey, congratulations, here's 2 tickets. And the function reserves 2 tickets or puts it in their account or something like that. That way I'm not breaking my for loop, but I have some condition that I can actually just say continue. I don't need this, but I want you to continue. I want you to sort of skip over that. And maybe like I've written some scripts that do for like redundancy. So like if I'm copying some keys over, let's say I'm iterating through, I had like this script that I wrote that pulled some data from AWS and visualized it. And there were some keys as I was iterating through, just like in our for in, that this key already had, like it was already placed there just based on how the data was given. I can just say continue and it doesn't add that key in there. But if that key wasn't already in my object, I could go ahead and add it. So continue is a pretty powerful, fun tool to be able to use. And these are 2 really popular things that you will see quite often. because they have great functionality. Like I said, if you want to still stay within your repetitive nature of your for loop, but you wanted to skip over some person trying to get tickets, then you can just use a continue. Or vice versa, you could have this and you're doing it and you're doing your for loop and you're also having a check and saying how many tickets are left, right? So you have this list of 5,000 people and you're doing all of your checks, and the minute that those tickets are up, you break and you're done. So whoever was next, bummer for them, but you've exited your for loop and now you no longer are iterating through all of those people. So you're assuring all your tickets are being out there and giving and distributed, but you don't have to like kind of do it manually. The computer can do it for you. Kat said, continue skips to the next iteration. Exactly. So what will happen is similar to how we talked about what it will do is, let's say, let me get my annotation. So right now I equals 0. Oops. Cool. It checks 0 greater. Yep. Goes. What it will do is it'll say if, and then I'll do my check. That's not true. So it console logs I. So I'm going to put CL. It's going to be 0, right? Then it increments up. I now becomes 1. Is 1 less than 10? It is. Is 1 equal 5? It is not. Cool. Console logs 1. Then it increments up. I becomes 2. It does that through 3 and then through 4, right? And it's going to console log 2, 3, 4. Once it gets to 4, it's going to increment up. Now I is 5. Is 5 less than 10? Yes, it is. Cool. Now it says if I equals 5. Well, that is true, right? 5 is equal to 5. Now it says continue. Even if I had a whole bunch of functionality, just like I talked about within this code, right? Within my for loop, similar to I call a function and I send an email and I call another function that decreases the amount of tickets that I have. If I have all of this stuff that, sends them an email and gets them tickets and distributes it, puts it to their account or whatever, it skips it because it gets this continue. It doesn't matter what's below me. It just goes and increments up. It goes immediately to here. And then now I become 6. And then we keep going with our process until this condition is no longer true. Somebody asked, and if you want to skip a few iterations, would you just need to tweak the logic? Yeah, so you could do an and or an or. You could say something like or I equals 8 equals 8. So let's see. So now you see that we get 0, we don't have 5, and we don't have 8. Oh, Ellen put the or. Yeah, so if you guys don't know, you can have multiple conditionals as well. So here, if I put 2 of these pipes, which is right above the enter on the right side of your keyboard. So there's like the backslash and then the pipes. What that will do is that will give you an or. So this if statement is going to check and say, is I equal to 5? Or if this condition is true, or this condition is true. Now I can have even another one. I equal to 9, right? And run this and I won't get 9 either. So you can have multiple now that can kind of handcuff you if you need them to all do the exact same thing. That's a great tool. But if you need them to do like, if it's 8, then do this. And if it's 9, then do this. It kind of just makes it a little bit confusing. Or you could do and. So if I wanted to do and I equaled 7, or let's say J, I don't know. Yeah. Now this is never going to happen, right? Because I cannot be 5 and 7 at the same time. But basically what this means is both of these conditions have to be true in order for it to enter into this code block right here. And means both of them have to be true, or means either of them have to be true. It doesn't matter. As long as one of them is true, then it goes and enters into that. Any thoughts, questions, concerns? Does this make sense? How do you guys feel about conditional statements? And like your ifs, else if, elif? Can you guys write like feel good or foggy? Because I don't know what the one is. Pretty good, feel good, good. Cool. Because if you guys want, I can go over conditional statements, in one of the office hours. I can kind of walk through that. I know that for some of you, this might be basic stuff. So that's why I tried to add in like the continues and the breaks. But for some of you, this might be one of the first times or sort of first practices you've been having with for loops and while loops. And so I wanted to try to have a mix of both situations to be true. And I'll add this code to GitHub. So if you guys did want it and you want to look at it, you absolutely can. Cool. That's all I have for today. So I'll stop sharing. And then I'll stop the recording.